Does your garden look like a weedy mess by the time the summer season comes, but you say to yourself, I'm going to do something about this year? But it never happens. If that's you, then you're going to want to stick around because today I'm going to show you how you can spend less time weeding and more time enjoying your garden with this one simple step. Hi guys, if you're new here, my name is Chantal. Welcome to my plant room. I'm going to confess this to you. This was my garden last spring and last summer. It drove me bananas. This picture that you are seeing right now is also my garden last spring and last summer. Do you notice the difference? One is mulched and one looks like it was not mulched, but was mulched about 3 to 4 years ago, just before I began to develop that garden. You see, what happens with mulch is that after a period of time, it starts to break down. But that's a good thing. We want the mulch to break down, but we also want it to smother the weeds. But what happens is after it starts to break down, its effectiveness at smothering the weeds gets lower and lower. So what's the solution, you may ask? Let's look at those two pictures again. If you notice, the bed that is newly mulched has almost no weeds, with the exception to a few things here and there. And the bed that was mulched about 3 to 4 years ago has tons, and I mean tons, of weeds. So what's the difference? The fresh mulch is great at suppressing the weeds because of the large chunks that this mulch is made up of, and those large chunks are really great at blocking the light and stopping the weeds, the weed seeds at the bottom from sprouting, because those seeds have a harder time to reach the light, and sometimes they are just simply too deep to reach the light. But also, this fresh mulch has no weed seeds in it, so there are no weeds sprouting on the surface. And another thing is that this fresh mulch hasn't broken down enough yet for the weeds to find it a suitable place to germinate in. So how do you accomplish a weed-free garden? And the solution is to mulch every season to every other season. And that might seem like too much for some of you, but I have some really good ideas that you can use to mulch your garden without any expense. That's zero expenses on your part. And here are my 5 solutions to mulch with zero expenses. You don't have to buy mulch from the store, but if that's you and you want to buy mulch from the store, that's great. You could also buy mulch bulk and get whatever mulch that you like. That's wonderful. But not everyone can afford to buy mulch. So what do? The number one solution that I have is to sign up to chipdrop.com. And that's a website that will connect you to your local arborists, and they will drop their wood chips right at your doorstep. Well, you don't want it to drop them at your doorstep, so you have to tell them where to drop it. But what's happening here is that they are getting this for free because they have to pay for the wood chips to drop them off somewhere. They have to pay to drop off the wood chips somewhere. And you have to pay to have someone to bring the wood chips for you. But in this case, they're getting it for free and you're getting it for free. So it's a win-win situation. And wood chips are one of the greatest things at suppressing weeds because they have the larger chunks and the wood hasn't yet decomposed, so it's really wonderful. But the drawback on fresh wood chips is that they do tend to steal a little bit of nitrogen from the soil. So how can you combat the stealing of nitrogen from the wood chips to make your garden look healthy after you have mulched it? One of the things you can do is you can add compost before you add the wood chips, or you can sprinkle a little bit of blood meal right over the wood chips. That will be the nitrogen that they need, and they won't steal the nitrogen from your soil. So you might have a little bit of extra cost, but you can find lots of organic bone meal and blood meal anywhere. And if you can't find it in your local garden center, I'll put a link for the one that I use down in the description box below. So right there, you fixed your nitrogen fixation problem. The number 2 solution that I have for you is fallen leaves. And fallen leaves are a great mulch, and they add tons of organic matter to your garden. You could gather all the leaves from your garden, and you can even ask your neighbors for the leaves from their yard, and you can do them a favor by cleaning up their yard and getting the leaves from their yard. So you both win this way. And now you get to take those fallen leaves. You could either mulch them with your lawnmower before you place them on your bed so that they're finer and they break down faster this way, and they provide more nutrients to your bed this way. We could put it either in your flower bed or in your vegetable garden, or you can just leave them as is. But if you do leave them as is, just keep in mind that they do mat down. Now, I am using this technique in one of my flower beds. I left the leaves as they are without mulching them, and I put them over the flower bed right on top of the grass, because I wanted to smother the grass and kill it. I did not want it to see the light. And those leaves, what happens is that once the water starts accumulating on them, they create this really thick mat, and they block any light, and they just smother the weeds beneath them, and they smother any seeds, and they stop them from germinating. They act sort of like cardboard, and they also create a sterile environment, and they stop the seeds from germinating, or if they do germinate, they die because they can't see the light. But if you want to get a big bang out of your leaves, what you would want to do is create a leaf mold with them. Now, personally, I haven't made a leaf mold yet, and I would like to try it one day, but there are tons of videos online where you can look up how to make leaf mold, and you will find tons of people that are showing you how to do it. But that is a really wonderful way to feed your flower beds or your vegetable beds, and also use it as mulch. Now, you don't need a thick layer of mulch, you just need a little bit of mulch, about a couple inches or maybe maximum 3 inches, unless you are putting it right on top of grass and you're trying to kill the grass, like I was doing in my new flower bed that I'm creating. But if that's not the case, 2 to 3 inches is all you need. What is that? So that's going to feed your soil and act as a weed suppressant. The number 3 solution that I have for you is garden debris. And garden debris, just like leaves, is wonderful because it has tons of organic matter in it. You'll have tons of nitrogen. Now, the one drawback about garden debris is that it does have tons of nitrogen. And you may ask, what? That's a drawback? Yes, it can be, because if you give your plants too much nitrogen, then they will put on tons of growth, but they might not flower or fruit for you as you would want them to. So the best thing to do is to mix the garden debris with your leaves. And this way you would have both the carbon and the nitrogen together that will create the best combination for your soil. They will feed your soil and they will suppress the weeds. But the one thing to know about this before you place them on your bed is that you want to let them to decompose a little bit before, because they will be hot, because the excess of the nitrogen with the leaves causes the mulch causes the compost, basically. That's what you're creating. You're causing that compost to decompose very quickly, and that creates a lot of heat and it can kill your plants. So you might want to let those sit together in a place for a little while, and then you will use them to mulch your beds with. So maybe you might want to let them sit during the fall season, and then when the spring season comes, you will use them to mulch your beds. That would be a wonderful mulch for your flower beds or your vegetable beds. But the one thing to be careful about this with is that with your garden debris, you don't want to put diseased plants like roses, for example, that can transmit diseases to other roses, or pest infested plants. Like if you have aphids or thrip or any sorts of these insects, you're not going to want to put that debris in with your compost that you are creating, because that's going to infect all of your flower beds or vegetable beds wherever you may put it. And the number 4 solution that I have for you is grass clippings. Now you may say, grass clippings, that's kind of ugly. But the nice thing about planting very heavily is that or when you have your plants very close together, is that you won't see the grass anymore. So during the growing season, when everything is looking lush and beautiful, you won't notice the grass because it's going to be covered by all the plant foliage. And grass is really wonderful because it's high in nitrogen. But again, because it's high in nitrogen, you just want to be careful to not overwhelm your plants with all of that nitrogen. You can always add some sort of material to it that is carbon-based, let it decompose a little bit, and then place it in your flower beds or in your vegetable beds. What I used to do a few years ago is I used to gather all the leaves from the garden and all the grass clippings, and I mix them all together, and then I place them on my vegetable beds, because honestly, I didn't care really that much of how my vegetable beds looked like. I wanted them to be neat, but I wanted them to produce. And when I did that, the vegetables that came out of there were humongous. Everything was healthy, and I had no weeds. It was such a simple way of gardening. I was able to feed my soil basically for free, and also I was able to stop the weeds from sprouting. So I did that for many years in my vegetable beds, and I love it, but I have stopped because we are not using the grass collector on the lawnmower anymore because it just jams up so much. And we also have a problem with creeping Charlie and dead nettle and stuff like that in our grass. So if you have these weeds in your garden, you're not going to want to use your grass clippings. And the number 5 solution on my list is compost. And I basically touched on that already by mixing the garden debris with the fallen leaves from your garden, also grass clippings with the fall leaves. But you can also add to it other material like your kitchen scraps, some eggshells and things like that. Let it break down for about 6 months, and then after that you can use it on your flower beds or your vegetable beds. It's going to feed your soil. It's going to make your plants super healthy. They are going to be so happy that you did that for them, and they're going to thank you with their beautiful flowers and their beautiful foliage. And also you are going to suppress the weeds. But one thing you have to be mindful about when you are using compost that you have made yourself is that you don't want to put any seeds in it, and you don't want to put any insect infested plants in it, as well as any debris from the garden that is affected with diseases that can spread through touch, like rose rosette disease, or maybe the black spots on roses. And I'm thinking about roses because I'm very protective of my roses. But there are other diseases out there that can also spread. You just have to do a little bit of research to find out if you can put that thing in your compost or not. Because the thing about homemade compost is that if you do not get it super hot, you're not going to kill those seeds and those insects that are in it. So they will spread to your other vegetables and flowers and things like that. So you just want to be mindful of that. But other than that, compost that you make at home is wonderful. You can also buy bulk compost, and it's going to be maybe on the cheaper side, but it's basically the same thing as buying bulk mulch. You can buy bulk manure. Manure is also great at suppressing weeds and at feeding your soil, but you have to make sure that it has already decomposed so that it doesn't burn your plants and that it doesn't have any weed seeds in it, because if it doesn't get hot enough, it's not going to kill those weed seeds. So that's just the one thing you have to make sure that you ask about when you are buying bulk manure or bulk compost. Okay, so we talked about the mulch, what type of mulch you use to make it basically zero cost. But now we are going to talk about what is the perfect time to mulch your garden. There are 2 seasons that are the perfect time to mulch your garden, and that is in the fall and in the spring. But when you are doing it in the spring, you want that to be the number 1 priority on your list before anything else, before you plant, before anything, unless you have some weeds you have to take care of. That is the one thing you have to do. And I'm speaking from experience because every season I say to myself, I'm going to mulch. And then I end up delaying it. Every single season, I'm like, I have to plant and I have to weed this place and I have to water and I have to do this and that. And by the time I'm ready to mulch, the weeds are already waist high and I'm thinking to myself, what have I done? And now I have no time to weed all these weeds that have sprouted in my garden, and my garden looks like a hot mess. So I'm speaking from experience. Don't do this to yourself. If you're gonna put mulch in the spring, make it the first thing that you are going to do on your list. But what if you choose to do it in the fall? When would you do it in the fall? What's the perfect time to do it in the fall? I would suggest to do it at the end of the fall season, after you have cleaned up your garden, there are no weeds left in your garden, you have cut back your perennials. It would be super easy and simple to spread it. You're not going to be kind of getting in between the plants to try to spread your mulch or anything like that. That's the perfect time to apply your mulch in the garden, the beginning of the spring and the end of the fall season. Here are a few things to remember. Mulch every season or every other season. Use free material from your garden to mulch with, such as leaves, grass clippings, or sign up for chipdrop.com to get free wood chips or compost that you make yourself. And finally, mulch either in the early spring, first thing, or in the late fall. If you have found this video helpful, do me a favor and share it with just one person that will also find it helpful. I will greatly appreciate that. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you again in the next video. Bye!